Busy people aren't the most productive people in the room. They're usually the most afraid. And the calendar full of meetings, the packed weekends, the inbox that never empties, none of it is ambition. It's armor. And what it's protecting them from is the one thing they haven't been able to face. In 2014, researchers at the University of Virginia ran a study that should have made headlines everywhere. They put people alone in a room. No phone. No book. No music. Nothing to do but sit with their own thoughts for 15 minutes. Then they gave them an option. A button on the table in front of them. Press it, and they'd receive a mild but real electric shock. Most people pressed it. One man pressed it 190 times. He said afterward that he simply preferred the pain to the quiet. That study wasn't designed to be funny, or strange, or a quirky footnote about human behavior. It was designed to measure something specific. How much discomfort the average person will accept just to avoid being alone with their own mind. And the answer, it turned out, was, almost any amount. The researchers weren't surprised. Because they already knew what the quiet does. Your brain, when left with nothing to process, doesn't go blank. It doesn't rest. It does something else entirely. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. A system that activates precisely when external stimulation drops away. When you stop doing, the brain starts a different kind of work. It surfaces unresolved emotions. It revisits unfinished decisions. It replays the conversation you handled badly, the relationship that ended wrong, the version of your life you quietly gave up on. The stillness doesn't create those thoughts. It just stops drowning them out. This is the part most people never let happen. Not because they're lazy, or undisciplined, or bad at meditating. But because the brain is very good at one thing, finding reasons to stay busy. And the modern world handed it an infinite supply of them. The average person checks their phone 144 times a day. Roughly once every 6.5 minutes of waking life. The standard explanation is addiction, or habit, or design. All of that is true. But underneath the mechanism is something older. Something the apps didn't create. They just found it, and learned how to use it. Psychologists have a term for it, experiential avoidance. The tendency to fill space, any space, to prevent a specific kind of internal experience. Not pain exactly. Not sadness exactly. Something harder to name. The low hum of things you haven't dealt with, sitting just below the surface, waiting for the noise to stop. Busyness is the most socially acceptable form this avoidance has ever taken. Nobody questions it. Nobody stages an intervention. In fact, the busier you appear, the more admirable you become. Productivity has been dressed up as a virtue so completely that the person running from themselves looks, from the outside, like the most ambitious person in the room. That cover story is not accidental. In the 1970s, a psychologist named Csikszentmihalyi began studying what he called the experience of optimal living. He wanted to know when people felt most alive, most engaged, most like themselves. He interviewed thousands of people across dozens of countries and professions. Artists and surgeons and factory workers and chess players. He was looking for what they had in common. What he found was not what productivity culture would tell you. The people who reported the deepest satisfaction weren't the ones who were always busy. They were the ones who had learned to choose their engagement deliberately. To move between action and stillness with intention. To let the quiet exist without immediately filling it. He called the state of deep engagement flow. But the thing almost nobody talks about is what he found on the other side of it. The people who couldn't access flow. The ones who needed constant external input to feel okay. He had a name for that condition too. He called it psychic entropy. A state where the mind, left unmanaged, turns against itself. Fills with noise. Generates anxiety not from anything real, but from the simple absence of distraction. Busyness doesn't prevent psychic entropy. It mimics the relief from it. The moment you stop, it comes back. So you stop stopping. The clinical name for the more severe version of this is anxiety. But most people who live this way have never been diagnosed with anything. They're functional. They're impressive, even. They show up. They deliver. They fill their hours so completely that by the time they reach the bed at night, there's nothing left to feel. They call it productivity. Their therapist, if they ever see one, might call it something else. Research published in the journal Psychological Science found that people who described themselves as chronically busy showed measurably reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex during unstructured time. The part of the brain responsible for self-reflection, emotional regulation, and long-term planning. The busier the life, the less access to the very systems needed to examine it. Which means the people most in need of stillness are the ones least able to tolerate it. The noise built the need for more noise. And by the time anyone thinks to look at what they're carrying, they've been carrying it so long they've forgotten it isn't supposed to be there. Here is what the avoidance is usually protecting. Not a single dramatic thing. Not a trauma, necessarily, or a defining failure. Usually it's something quieter. A creeping sense that the life being lived doesn't match the life that was imagined. A relationship that has been slowly becoming something neither person intended. A career chosen for the wrong reasons, built on a version of yourself that no longer fits. A grief that was never properly felt because there was always something more urgent to get back to. None of these things announce themselves loudly. They don't have to. They just wait. Patient and completely silent. Knowing that eventually, the noise will stop. The busy person senses them. Not consciously, not always. But in the vague restlessness that appears on slow Sunday afternoons. In the irritability that arrives without a visible cause. In the strange, hollow feeling that settles in after a genuinely successful day, when by every measurable standard things are fine, and yet something underneath isn't. That feeling is not a malfunction. It's a message. And the only way to read it is to stop moving long enough to hear it. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from this. Not the clean, honest tiredness that follows real effort. Something stranger. A fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. That weekends don't touch. That arrives even in the middle of a vacation, because the body changed location but the mind brought everything with it. In occupational psychology, this is sometimes called running on empty. A state where the external behaviors of productivity continue, but the internal resources that make them meaningful have been quietly depleted. The work gets done. The obligations get met. But none of it lands. It passes through a person like water through sand, leaving nothing behind. The people in this state rarely identify it themselves. They describe it as burnout, or stress, or just the way things are for a while. What they don't say, because they often haven't named it even internally, is that they are exhausted from the effort of not feeling something. That the heaviest thing they carry isn't their workload. It's the weight of the thing they're working to avoid. There is a moment, in therapy, that experienced clinicians recognize. It arrives differently for different people, but the structure is almost always the same. The person has been talking for weeks, maybe months. Filling the hour with things that happened, problems to solve, external events to analyze. And then one day, the usual material runs out. And the room gets quiet. And something shifts. The thing they came in carrying, without knowing they were carrying it, finally surfaces. Therapists don't manufacture that moment. They just stop filling the silence. And wait. The quiet was never the problem. It was the answer, sitting there the whole time, waiting for the noise to stop. This isn't an argument against work, or ambition, or a full life. Some busyness is real. Some of it is necessary. Some of it is genuinely chosen and genuinely nourishing. That kind looks different from the inside. It has a quality of presence to it. Of being in the thing rather than fleeing into it. The distinction is simple, even if it isn't easy. Ask yourself, honestly, what would happen if tomorrow's schedule cleared completely? If the obligations dissolved? If the notifications stopped? If there was nothing left to do but sit with yourself for an afternoon? Does that feel like relief? Or does it feel like something you'd rather not think about? That answer tells you more about your relationship with busyness than any productivity book ever will. The people who have learned to be still aren't the ones who have less going on. They're the ones who stopped using activity to manage their inner life. Who discovered that the thing they'd been running from was never as dangerous as the running itself. That the feeling they were afraid to feel was survivable. That on the other side of the quiet was not collapse, but clarity. The noise will always be available. The world will always provide more of it. There will always be another thing to do, another reason to wait until later to slow down. But the thoughts that surface in the stillness aren't your enemies. They're the parts of you that have been trying to get your attention for a long time. You've been too busy to notice. The question isn't whether you can afford to slow down. It's what you're paying to stay this fast.